This is particularly true of the joint stock company whose shareholders are united solely in their interest in the dividends, to such an extent that they do not even care what the company produces. The objective lack of connections between the subject and the object in which the individual has a merely monetary interest is reflected in his personal lack of connection with other human subjects with whom he shares only money interests. Here we have one of the most effective cultural formations, namely the possibility of the individual participating in associations, the objective purpose of which he wants to promote and enjoy, without that connection implying any commitment on his part. Money has made it possible for people to join a group without having to give up any personal freedom and reserve. This is the fundamental, extremely important divergence from the medieval form of unification, which did not distinguish between man as such and man as a member of an association. It enclosed within its sphere the general economic, religious, political, and familial interests alike. The permanent association at that early stage did not yet know the form of a mere contribution, least of all the provision of its main funds from them and from limited liabilities. By and large, and with the reservations necessary for such a general assertion, one might say that the relationships between people were formerly more close, less modified by mediations, mixtures and reserve, and that there were less problematical and noncommittal relationships. The relationship of the individual to the association stood under the banner of all or nothing. It did not tolerate a divisibility by which only a small particle of the otherwise independent personality might enter into it, and it did not find its ideal in giving and receiving money as the sole bond of association. This is valid not only for the individual but also for collective individuals. The money form of common interests also ensures that associations have the possibility of joining a higher unit without its members having to forego their independence and distinctiveness. After 1848 in France, syndicates of workers' associations of the same trade grew up, each of them delivering its indivisible fund to this syndicate and thereby providing an indivisible common fund whose main purpose was wholesale purchasing and offering of loans, etc. It was never the purpose of the syndicates, however, to unite the participating associations in a single unit, rather, each of them was supposed to preserve its particular organization. This case is particularly instructive since, at that time, workers had a genuine obsession for forming associations. If they expressly rejected this amalgamation, then there must have been particularly strong reasons for mutual reserve, and yet they found a way of realizing the existing unity of their interest in that communality through the mere possession of money. Certain associations were made possible only on the basis of this completely subjective freedom which is guaranteed to the members of an association by their money contributions. The Gustav Adolf Association, the large community for the support of needy evangelical congregations, could never have come into existence and into operation unless the character, or rather lack of character, of money contributions had blurred the contributors' doctrinal differences. Lutheran, Reformed and United congregations would have been unwilling to take part in any other form of amalgamation. The same is true when the common monetary interest becomes, as it were, a passive one. Until well into the Middle Ages, the English clergy did not form a unified group. In particular, the bishops as feudal lords belonged to the lords and were socially and politically distinct from the lower clergy. This was true as long as taxes were imposed only on landed property, of which the lower clergy had no part. As soon as the special taxation of all clerical income was introduced, a common interest for the whole stratum was created, either in terms of their opposition to it or acceptance of it. An expert on that period considers this event to be one of the most important bonds that first made the clergy a unified estate. With the beginning of a money economy, economic associations developed out of the same basic motive. The increase in capital and its growing importance from the 14th century onwards made it necessary to keep it undivided within the family. By keeping the shares of all the heirs together, the shares became much more profitable to each heir than they would have been had they been apportioned. In Germany, the participation of all heirs in the undivided legacy began to take place, as well as the continued existence of the old enterprise under joint ownership. This had two consequences. The separation of the household economy from the enterprise evolved within the family so that members of the family, in which the domestic economy and other capital were separated, could remain partners in an undivided firm. While the importance of money capital had dissolved the traditional family economy, it now created a new unification of these separate elements, in which pure objectivity, released from specific private interests, entered into the interests of capital. Secondly, this communal mode of interests was also taken over by others who did not even have family relations. After the business had been severed from the household economy, the unifying form of working capital was also chosen by people unrelated to each other, so that by the beginning of the 15th century the general partnership was already in use. Only after the money economy became prevalent did purely corporate property develop, in which the commonly owned capital was objectified in an independent unit and legal entity over and above the various partners, who participated in it with only a limited part of their assets and not as individual persons. Only money could bring about such associations which in no way prejudiced the individual member. Only money could create, in its pure form, the association for particular purposes. A type of organization that united individuals' non-personal elements in a project. Money has provided us with the sole possibility for uniting people while excluding everything personal and specific. The disintegrating and isolating effect of money is not only the general precondition and corollary of this conciliatory and unifying quality. Under specific historic conditions, money simultaneously exerts both a disintegrating and a unifying effect. For instance, the organic unity and narrowness of family life has on the one hand been destroyed as a consequence of the money economy, while, acknowledging this as a fact, it has been emphasized that the family has become almost nothing more than an organization for inheritance. If, among several interests that determine the cohesion of the group, one of them has a destructive effect upon all the others, then this interest will survive the others and become the only bond between the different elements whose other relationships it has destroyed. It is not only because of its immanent character, but precisely because it destroys so many other kinds of relationships between people, that money establishes relationships between elements that otherwise would have no connection whatsoever. Today there probably exists no association between people that does not include some monetary interest, even if it is only the rent for a hall for a religious association. The more the unifying bond of social life takes on the character of an association for specific purposes, the more soulless it becomes. The complete heartlessness of money is reflected in our social culture, which is itself determined by money. Perhaps the power of the socialist ideal is partly a reaction to this. For by declaring war upon this monetary system, socialism seeks to abolish the individual's isolation in relation to the group as embodied in the form of the purposive association, and at the same time it appeals to all the innermost and enthusiastic sympathies for the group that may lie dormant in the individual. Undoubtedly, socialism is directed towards a rationalization of life, towards control of life's chance and unique elements by the law-like regularities and calculations of reason. At the same time, socialism has affinities with the hollow communistic instincts that, as the residue of times long since past, still lie in the remote corners of the soul. Socialism's dual motivations have diametrically opposed psychic roots. On the one hand, socialism is the final developmental product of the rationalistic money economy, and on the other it is the embodiment of the most basic instincts and emotions. The distinguishing feature of its power of attraction lies in rationalism as well as a reaction to rationalism. Socialism has found its inspiring ideal in the ancient clanhood with its communistic equality, while the monetary system leads the individual retrospectively to concentrate upon himself and to leave as objects of personal and emotional devotion on the one hand only the closest individual relations, such as family and friends, and on the other the most remote spheres such as the mother country or mankind.